Welcome to the Global Justice Report, an online production of the Center for Global Justice. I'm Betsy Bowman. I'm your host for today's program. We are re-recording the first 10 minutes of our July 10 presentation of our book, which was omitted due to some technical glitch, so that the recording online will be complete. The Center for Global Justice, El Centro para la Justicia Global, is a multinational and bilingual research center located in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. The center is devoted to research and learning for a better world and empowering the solidarity economy. Since the end of the pandemic, we have adopted a hybrid form for our events, combining in-person and online webinars to reach as much of our public as possible. If you are in San Miguel, you can attend our events in person at the Quinta Loreto Community Room every Monday at 1 p.m. For those out of town, you can participate online at our webpage, www.globaljusticecenter.org. You can also go to our webpage to see what programs are coming up. The pandemic and Cliff's death were a terrible trauma to all of us at the center, and our coffers are empty as so many of our events and trips were canceled. Without these revenue-generating programs, we depend on your donations to support these live webinars and to continue to pay our staff. You can donate at our website, globaljusticecenter.org. Today's program is about the 150th webinar we've done. Since instituting these webinars, we've had more than 30,000 views on our YouTube channel. We're very proud of our outreach and educational programming. We are now resuming our educational trips to Cuba, the Sierra Gorda, Chiapas, and the Cooperative Network at Tosepan, and we are resuming our student group visits and internships here in San Miguel de Allende. Please consider joining one of our trips or bring a group of students to San Miguel de Allende. Possibly the best antidote to the anti-immigrant sentiment in the United States is a visit to Mexico. Today, Bob Stone and I will be presenting to you our just published book, Reading Sartre's Second Ethics. And I'd like to show you a copy of it. This is the library version of our book, just out. And on our webpage, you can find information about how to order it. It's very expensive, I'm afraid. And we hope in a year or so there will be a paperback edition, which will be much more affordable. I'd also like to take a moment to point out the painting in the background, which is a painting by Sally Latch that is being used as the logo for a conference on Merchants of Death, war crimes tribunal that will be held in the United States, November 10 to 13. So go to Merchants of Death and you can get your own t-shirt of Sally Latch's now famous painting. So welcome to our first public presentation of our book. The gathering is both in person and by Zoom. Right now, or last Monday rather, we have about 35 online participants, and we invite you to contribute comments and questions. Bob Stone and I co-founded the Center for Global Justice with the late and much missed Cliff DuRand. We also wrote our book on Sartre's second ethics. It is titled Reading Sartre's Second Ethics, and it is subtitled Morality, History, and Integral Humanity. Capping 40 years study begun in 1982 of the French existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre, we hold that his second ethics of 1964-65 speaks to us today in our epoch. After a condensed overview of the second ethics, we'll discuss with you if and how much it helps us now. In August of 1945, after the US dropped atom bombs on Japan, 78 years later, there are even more deadly version of these bombs that still threaten all humans and life in general, and threaten even more credibly. We and Sartre both live under this 78-year-old nuclear threat, which defines our epoch. Mere weeks after the bombings, Sartre noted the new epoch's fascination with collective suicide or omnicide. Suicide or not was a choice we must each make, for in each of us, humanity discovers its potential death. Humanity takes responsibility for its life and death. So what does Sartre teach us about life in the age of omnicide? In October of 45, in a part of his first ethics titled Existentialism is a Humanism, Sartre held that we are defined neither by God nor genetics, but by what our own free historical acts project as norms. Bob will take over from here, and I will rejoin the presentation in 10 minutes or so. Thank you.
So good to see old friends. In October of 1945, in a part of his first titled Existentialism is a Humanism, Sartre held that since we are defined neither by God nor by genetics, but rather by what our own free historical acts project as norms, being thus defined by what we do, we can remake ourselves as agents by creating a new normative image of humanity, if we so choose. But what is that history that we would make, and how do we do it? How do we make it with our acts? Since those acts constitute history, for good or ill, answers to such questions was to do that better. But while the 1945 lecture called for making a new history, it was itself silent on what history is and how it is made. In 1960, he made up for the deficit. Sartre diagnosed our difficulty in this that year with Critique of Dialectical Reason. We've produced ourselves up to now indirectly as products of our product, he held there. That is, we serve systems like capitalism and, in those days, Stalinism, instead of directly making ourselves. And how is that done, pray tell? Critique of Dialectical Reason in 1960 left that for the second ethics to say, and it came along in 1964, the year he got the and refused the Nobel Prize. Meanwhile, the 1960s began. Cuba's 1959 went out, and Algeria gained independence in 1962. For Sartre, these major liberating events called for a new global ethics grounded in need. He was optimistic, stimulated by these victories, thought what we would now look back at 1968 was going to happen. Resistors to Nazi torture and French Algeria had unveiled the power of ethical conduct to change history. They confirmed Kant's insight that if we morally ought to do act X, then we can do it, since we can't be duty-bound to do the impossible. At the center of the second ethics, our needs, to which I now turn, our needs posit integral humanity as unconditionally possible. Those are both terms of art in the second ethics. As end, they unconditionally realizable, and namely integral humanity. We'll get to what that is. And they elicit, these ends elicit work as means to them, to it. The entire human group, by altering nature, directly restores integrity to all that is it meets all needs, which can be done without subordination to a system. As end, integral humanity, referring both to satisfied needs and to all humans, since you have humans meeting needs with their work, is the synthetic unity of all the means to itself. That's what integral humanity is. It is the unity of the means to it. Taking such means as parts or moments of an evolving whole or totalization. For the means to be accepted for a means to be accepted by the revolutionary group into that ongoing project of change, it must also be aimed at realizing humanity. This growing synthesis is therefore also a criterion by which revolutionaries can avoid anti-human means that would explode the unity that they would enter. For example, terror is not ruled out, especially by totally deprived groupings, but must never be used first or excused and justified or used to govern. In this way, Sartre built Camusian moral restraints into his notion of the revolutionary act. To lay out in more detail for the philosophers in the audience, Sartre's entire work entitled Morality and History, that is both of the sets of lectures, one for Gramsci Institute in Rome and the other for the American audience. He had agreed to present lectures for. He and Beauvoir were scheduled to go to Cornell in '65 in March. These together constitute the second ethics, and the unfolding totalization of history as the dramatic development of morality. Very pregnant phrase. What does it mean? First, examining moral phenomena such as imperatives, values, institutions, etc. Sartre deduces their common structure of unconditional possibility. If you ought to do X, you can. He makes much of that point of Kant's, that insight. And any moral norm posits itself as unconditionally possible, even alienated norms. This is not to say it is necessarily successful, like the medieval knight who dies, but he also saves honor in doing so. This human activity or praxis invents means to its end. Invention is thus the root of the unconditionally possible. You can't be unconditionally required to do an act without having the capacity as practical agent for invention. This root comes from need, which is always its own justification, and it posits the unconditionally possible invention founded in need as precisely what the human needs to meet his or her needs. Sartre calls this integral humanity. The play we are in up to now, on the analogy with history as theater, as drama, is in its second act, as it were. As such, it describes our situation of conjuncture. The question is, what are we to do about it? As of now, we are headed toward omnicide. We, and I mean we in the full sense of collective human agency, must write or enact the third act as resolution of the conflicts of the second. What we had observed must now be mere raw material awaiting our own intervention in order to have the meaning we give it. And we give it that meaning to avoid continuing to be observers in our own situation, which is omnicide by nuclear war or climate catastrophe. Our situation today is that the drama is headed that way. Where are we, and who is available to act with us to complete the moral drama up to now? We need ourselves as integrally human to stop being directed toward omnicide. Oh, okay, excuse me. She's going to take it from there.
So Sartre's second ethics obviously resonates with other fellow travelers among us, friends of all of ours. Take, for example, Silvia Federici's analysis of women's unpaid reproductive labor. Being excluded from the wage paid workers by owners, this free labor allowed capital accumulation to start, and today still makes profits possible. Federici instead favors sharing such labor sense by freeing us from imperatives to first grow capital. We would all make integral humanity. Systematic subordination of human flourishing to capital's concentration and growth is traced by Smith. Self-management and worker ownership, as described in David Schweikert's work, show concrete paths away from capital's concentration. Focus on making humanity de-externalizes our catastrophic destruction of nature is shown by Matthew Alley, Joel Covell, and others. So these are just a few of the fellow travelers here. Yanis Varoufakis' recent advocacy of democracy to Cuba's parliament back in January echoes Sartre's opening of new roads to integral humanity. Were humans to recognize the moral primacy that Sartre awards to needs, we'd end the Ukraine war so that its rich soil could head off huge conflicts that are building around the world. Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, Afghanistan, Haiti, Honduras, whatever. Given Sartre's endorsement of Fidel Castro's view on need back in 1960, today's closest fellow travelers with his second ethics may be the Cuban people whose personal practice of international aid and medical missions, wherever needed, are equal to the World Health Organization, and despite an embargo of needed materials, this demonstrates heroic human solidarity. Those of you who are familiar with Marx will recognize, of course, similarities between Sartre's integral humanity and Marx's communism. Both would structure social collaboration on the maxim, quote, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. But where communism envisions constructing a system of people's control of the means of production and distribution, integral humanity envisions liberating long exploited capacities to flourish in unknowable and unpredictable ways. Where communism is a system to be built and managed, integral humanity is a task of creating ourselves beyond all systems, constantly sharpening our recognition of how tethering innovations differ from liberating innovations. Returning to the hopeful 64-65 context into which Sartre inserted the second ethics, the Cuban and Algerian revolutions were not followed by anything like the global uprisings of 68, as Sartre might have expected. 1968's rotating uprisings zigzagged around the planet, sparked by the January Tet Offensive in Vietnam, and led to a full year of global rebellion, giving the 60s their theme. In February 1965, Sartre may have discerned in President Johnson's fierce bombing of North Vietnam a global repression of uprisings like Cuba and Algeria. Sartre may or may not have been wise to cancel his Cornell lectures, which he did to protest Johnson's bombing. They'd been planned for the spring. He postponed his work on his second ethics and ultimately abandoned them. In 1986, Simone de Beauvoir wrote to us that, in her view, the ethics of 64-65 was, quote, the culminating point of Sartre's ethical thought. In 1947, rejecting both US capitalism and Soviet Stalinism, Sartre had called for a neutral Europe to lead the world to peace. To close class divisions, he called for a new socialist humanism. Against anti-Semitism and anti-Black racism, he emphasized such a humanism's inclusiveness. His many writings on colonialism and imperialism called for something like at least a global debate on realizing integral humanity. Well, we'll stop on that note, and we now ask you if we've told you enough about Sartre's work on ethics, Sartre's second ethics, for you to say, well, incidentally, it appears just when it's called for a global uprising to save human and other life on Earth seems most pertinent. In fact, as the USA's own global empire starts or continues its decline, like those of Britain and France, leaking moral credibility each day that it continues to practice torture, we wonder if the second ethics may be even more today than when it was written in 64 and 65. So wanted to address the relevance of Sartre's second ethics, written back in 64-65, to the situation we're in today. We've sketched his spiraling dialectic of need to unconditional possibility, to invention, to a synthesis in integral humanity, to making ourselves our direct product rather than the product of our product or the product of capitalism as it happens today. So we're hoping that this will give you ample space for asking questions and imagining what the relevance of Sartre's work might be, and to ask specific questions about Sartre's second ethics as well. So I'd like to thank you and ask Bob to rejoin me.
We are available for questions, comments, brickbats, embraces.
Brickbats, I don't know about that. I think we're a little old for that.
It's so great to see so many good friends from so long ago.
So, yeah. You're all speechless. We tried to make this really intelligible.
We stuck to generalities.
Okay, Dennis, you have a question.
I did. I did. First of all, great to see you guys, and thank you for this excellent introduction to this work that has been on the burner for so long. I wanted to ask you, since you brought up Beauvoir's comment that you received from her just before her death, do you agree with the fact that it seems that in 1965 he was all done with the ethical question, the question of morality? Because it has been posed that during the period 1965 to 80, there might have been a third ethics that people have kind of constructed toward the end of his, with regard to his ethical thought, especially during the 1970s. Most of it, of course, occurs in interviews, in particular the lengthy interview with Benny Levy. But is there, in your mind, a cessation of ethical thought in 65, as there was, for example, with the novel in the late 1940s, 1952? Or do you think that Sartre's ethical thought continued into the 1970s? Do we take, how seriously do we take the oral part of that thought, if you will? Because it's more oral than it is actual written form that on which you guys have worked.
Right. Well, we've been debating this for decades now.
Right.
What do we do about the work called Hope Now? And
Gathered by Ron Aronson.
And Van den Hoven. The idea of moving from the I to the we, he says that there's a morality of the us, and that is, of course, what Sartre does in moving from happiness to the Critique of Dialectical Reason. He moves from the I to the we. But I don't think, as I've said, we can, after his blinding stroke of 74, I don't think we can take so-called rote after that point as seriously as his other works. And we can also think of the morality as being in the Flaubert, in the last volume of his biography of Flaubert, the family idiot. But that's a very Black humanism. So I don't know.
We've presented the second ethics in our book as standalone merits,
Right.
of and there was a third ethics, and Sartre used that term himself as of 1972. And he denounced his early, well, he didn't denounce, never renounced or denounced anything he wrote, but he abandoned it. He stopped work on it. He was going to finish it up until 72. Then when he said he had a third ethics based on the notion of fraternity, that became the story. And he never stopped developing as an ethical thinker.
Right.
Just by way of answer to your direct question.
Right.
So we have our own suspicion about what motivated him. As he wrote in the little book on genocide edited by Arlette, he saw the bombing of North Vietnam in '65 as a colossal address to mankind. Watch out, we're going to come get you if you try to rebel.
Which, of course, has been repeated, every few years since then.
Yeah,
by the U.S. government. As
hard. It's quite a while, but only now we ask the question: is this ethics really possible? Is there another uprising coming on the horizon as the empire, capitalist empire, of the run by the U.S. and others going to decline. So that's how we got to that question. But you're right. He's kept on thinking. He never stopped being an ethical thinker.
All right, thank you.
Yes, please. Any other thoughts, questions, interventions of any kind? Is
Well,
that
I could say something if you'd like.
I think, is that Betty?
yes? There's someone speaking. Please speak up.
I said, this is Norma. Hi.
Hi, Norma.
Hi, and I've been hesitating to post this in the material you set out about this presentation today, and it's nice to see you all again, by the way.
Good to see you.
Good. They referred to Stalin in some vilifying form that what's his name, Sartre used. And I've written a comment about just that, because Stalin was the great defender of the revolution. And that is put the fear of the capitalist gods into their hearts extensively. And my comment talks about that Stalin was encouraged, that the imperialists were encouraging Hitler to march south against the Soviet Revolution, during World War II. That World War II was implemented in order to topple the Russian Revolution, because it was such a bright.
Well, that's a different story that takes us off in a very different direction. I would like to hear what Betty Cannon's question is. Hi, Betty. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? I can't hear you. You're still muted. Now she's.
I said it's great to see you guys.
Well, it's great to see you.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask about, since Sartre's work is, I think, as he said, a continuous development, and he didn't renounce anything. And since the Flaubert biography in some ways seems to be an integration of all of it, what would you say about the connection between need and in Sartre's later work and desire in his earlier work?
That's a wonderful question.
And that's something a shrink would ask. You answered, Bob.
Well, Hazel Bunce has wonderful insights on this matter. We've lost her.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I'm pretty convinced that one of the reasons capitalism is swept Eastern Europe and everyone wants to be a consumer is because it appeals to our desire. You can get your desires. Well, socialism claims to serve needs, and now needs are much more modest. We know they can be met. And we share them. So the principle of sharing equality is built into the project of meeting needs. Shrinks like you are awakening, and that's one of the great contributions you make. But Sartre picked up I think he picked up the notion of the moral primacy of needs from Andre Gortz, whose book on the ethics of history, in my translation, said that the worker comes to the labor contract nude, naked, just with his needs, and he has no interest. He has no resources, and he has to sell his labor. It's extorted from him, the sacrifice of the surplus value that goes to profit. And so I think I want to read Judy Butler's book on desire again, but I think the great strength of Marx's insight and picked up and reaffirmed by Sartre in the Second Ethics is very worth keeping. Now he does tend away from that view of need as he gets older. He raises questions about it in the Benny Levy, or not in the Benny Levy, but in the essay on realism, his realism. It's in the Ron Aronson volume, Sartre Today.
But what do you think, Betty?
Yeah, please. I'd love
Yeah,
to hear.
because I poured over it ever since you sent me the Rome lecture, so
Right, yeah.
early on.
What do you-
So actually, I wonder, I keep thinking about nothingness, okay, back in being a nothingness as a lack, and desire as the lack, and of course need as a lack. And I keep wondering whether raw need in the human world actually exists, if it isn't always socialized need, which would sort of be desire. That's a question I have.
And your answer? You've been
I
thinking
I
about it.
think it is. I think we're not. I think consciousness and social development takes us out of the animal kingdom in a way. Not that we're not related to it and connected to it, and shouldn't be and should sever our connections, but just that there's something else going on with humans. And always, even when I'm hungry, I have certain ways I want to eat and certain things, and it's socialized. Yeah.
Right. That's a very good point. Even when we're hungry,
Yeah.
not just any food.
Yeah.
Will, we all have
Maybe
enough.
it will come to that, but
That's it.
but maybe
It
not.
might, and it might fairly soon.
It might be fairly soon.
Can you hear?
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Can I interject
I'm-
something on that?
Please.
I'm just, Betty, I think you're absolutely right. Need and scarcity in Sartre's thought are social relations. They're social categories. They're not, so it's not, I'm not sure whether we could get to a place where we could describe raw need in any human context. And I'm not even sure the idea of raw need is useful. I don't think Sartre would have seen it as useful, because we're sort of always already in, well, to use his earlier language, in a situation. So,
Yes,
it's-
exactly. We're always in a situation.
and it's not to say, I mean, you know, there's the rule of threes, right? If you're out of air for 3 minutes, you're in trouble. If you're out of warmth for 3 hours, you're in trouble. If you're out of water for 3 days, you're in trouble. If you're out of food for 3 weeks, you're in trouble. But these are abstractions, you know, even in, I mean, they're real, but that's sort of the most purely biological sense of need. And it doesn't take us very far in thinking about human situations, you know. So anyway, that's
So,
just
yeah,
a
I
thought.
agree with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Arturo. Sure, come on in.
Come on up. This is Arturo.
First of all, thank you very much, Bob and Betsy, for opening my mind to Sartre. I've resisted Sartre ever since about 1970 when I could. However, in reading your book, you've created a wider panoramic vision while providing focus. And the focus I would like to know at this time is the comment that you made with your gestures, Betsy, the spiraling dialectic. And again, and with that is you ignite my imagination to make this offering for your comments. As you know, Antonio Gramsci struggled in prison to us throughout the prison notebooks the meaning of the dialectic. What I think, and I recommend to everyone to read chapter 1 over and over, because chapter 1 in itself reveals the spiral at so many different levels. And to that, I just ask you to come a bit more, elaborate a bit more, even though you already said you're going to try to avoid the details. And I offer this reference to you. Antonio Gramsci told us in prison notebooks, told the world when they were finally discovered that the dialectical process is merely the first, the scientific process is merely the first cell of the dialect. And I think at multiple levels, what you guys reveal in Sartre's work in chapter 1 is a big opening to what Gramsci meant, that scientific method is merely the first cell of the dialectic. Now, if I haven't put too much pressure on you guys, would you elaborate for us a little? And to the audience here and in the internet, pour yourselves into that first chapter.
Thank you, Arturo.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not nearly as familiar with Gramsci as Arturo is. And we Sartreans know how Sartre argues in spirals. And he revisits part of the spiraling dialectic is revisiting the same examples. He argues by example, and he revisits the same examples over and over again, but each time drawing out more and more. And in the Critique of Dialectical Reason and in the mid-second ethics, everything starts with need, and he doesn't bother to define whether it's just raw, brute animal need or if it's socialized need as desire. But obviously, we all have to eat. And from need, that sort of engenders the possibility of unconditional possibility. If you need something, you can thing that is something to meet your need. And the unconditional possibility invents, you're looking around yourself, well, gee, where am I going to find something to eat? Surely there's a fruit tree somewhere, especially in Mexico. And you can pick up some fruit, or as Sartre says, well, larks do not drop from the sky already cooked. We can't wait for that to happen. But, so from need, the unconditional possibility of fulfilling that need, to inventing some means to do so, and from inventing, well, the lark doesn't fall out of the sky already cooked, but if we are together in a group praxis towards not cooking larks and giving the profit from selling them to some capitalist, but to eating them ourselves, maybe this spiraling dialectic that goes from need to unconditional possibility to invention and then to integral humanity. Maybe Sartre argues that what we really need is all of ourselves together, working together to meet our needs, rather than accumulating capital for someone else, or, we need all of ourselves working together. And this is this is rooted in need. And this is posited in human. So whether we want to look at need as, animal need or socialized need, we all have needs, and animals and plants have needs, and we need to work together we need to invent, and it's possible to do so. Now, we might not succeed, but we have to assume that we can meet needs. It is unconditionally possible to meet them, and we can invent means to do so. And we probably need all of us to help each other do it. So how would you answer the question?
I think you've done a good job.
Well, thank you, Bob.
Do I see Fred Evans here?
Yeah, he's right here. He's hiding, but he's there.
Oh, yes, there's the two of you. I'm so glad you. Fred, I have a question for you. I have been moved over the years so much by your book on the multi-voicity, and I'm wondering if how you would think of the integral humanity thesis of Sartre's in relation to that notion of yours, so beautifully put out in your book, which I commend to everyone.
First, Bob, thanks very much. Well, while you and Betsy and the others have been talking, it threw me back, 20 years now, when we used to meet in New York, a reading group that you headed up.
At Carson's house, and I just see Carson joining us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, those years, I think it was about 1978, 79, around in there. And you did such a wonderful job of presenting Sartre to us and his later work. And I'm glad, I know you've been working on this book for a long time, but it's amazing to me that you've been able to complete it and then have done, you and Betsy, all the activism work that you've done for all the rest of us for so long. So that's the first thing I wanted to say, and sort of holding it back, but waiting for a chance to say it, to thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred. We have to thank Matthew Alley, the editor of our book too. So
Editors are incredibly important, yes.
Matthew,
well, Matthew's here with us. And without Matthew, it wouldn't have happened, but go
that's for
ahead.
sure.
Then to the broader question, what I was thinking when we were talking about integral humanity, and my idea of the multi-voice body, there's a even more general idea than the multi-voice body that kind of lies in the background there. And the idea of three ethical political virtues. One of them solidarity, the other is heterogeneity, and the third is fecundity, or the production of new voices through the interplay of others. And the idea is that you want all three of those without any one of them canceling out the other. And so I was going to come back with a question of, with Sartre's ethics, how do you see him bringing those three, solidarity, heterogeneity, and fecundity, or the production of new voices through the open interplay of the others, together without one of them canceling out the other? How does his idea of solidarity, how does his idea of integral humanity not allow solidarity to cancel out heterogeneity and fecundity, or vice versa?
Fecundity, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, the production of
Well,
new
the idea
voices through the interplay of the others.
Well, play is an important part of the answer, I think. And a system beyond all systems.
Mhm.
How do we phrase it? That there's no system to be created, but a sort of spontaneous engendering of liberatory strategies. Why don't you take it from there, Bob? I'm going to look for exactly what we said.
That sounded helpful to me.
Yeah, we talked about heroic human solidarity. Well, that was in terms of the Cubans. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, that's what I was going to mention, the Cuban example.
Creating ourselves beyond all systems, sharpening our recognition of
Well, it seems to me,
innovations.
well, Sartre went to Cuba in March of 1960. And met with Fidel, toured the island with him, was very deeply affected by Fidel's statement that if of the primacy of need and the need to meet it, need as a claim on others' work and solidarity. Well, Fidel meant that, and it got into the living morality of Cubans, who to this day are amazing in their response to medical and pharmacological and needs all around the world, despite the fact that they don't have medicines due to the embargo by the Imperium to the north.
Well, they have their own pharmaceutical industry.
Well, they have an amazing pharmaceutical industry. But the point I'm making is that they have this spirit of mission and service to humanity, which is what Sartre picked up on and resonated with and installed in the second essay. And just as Cuba has installed it in its workaday moral image of itself, and these are virtues only to the extent they're not everyday practices of a liberated humanity. We admire them because of their scarcity, but Cuba wants to make them workaday habits, and is managing to do that somehow. And that's lesson in solidarity is visible there, as you may have. Have you been on any of Cliff's trips to Cuba?
The one I thought I was going on was the one that got canceled because
Oh.
of a very interesting reason. Cuba was in a crisis at the time, and they wanted to make sure that their philosophers were going to be part of the solution to it. And I kept thinking in our own country, I don't know how if we'd ever be asked to do that. But so that was the one I was going to go on. And then after that, there was always some problem or another why I couldn't go. But I've been envious of you who did. I've been through, of course, through a lot of different places in Latin America, but Cuba is still one that I have not been to, and it's probably the most important to me, maybe. But I was
We have
thinking,
a trip coming up.
no, I've already seen, I had some trouble making that one too, because I thought about that. Barbara and I were talking about it. The other thing I wanted to say, there was something else that I remember, Bob, and where I learned very much from you. You were the external reader for my dissertation back in at that time as well. And I learned so much from your tutelage, your tutorship with respect to that dissertation from you. And that would fit into this question that we were just dealing with. So I thank you for the reply you gave to the reply to the question, the question you asked me, and then I asked you to give a reply to it. Thank you very much.
Solidarity doesn't limit, a multiplicity of voices and approaches to life. David Graeber talks about how indigenous societies in North America were very more playful and play-like than our society is now. And he talks about how so-called Western civilization has gotten stuck, is stuck in this
Won't experiment.
rut of this hierarchical rut, producing capital and concentrating capital, I suppose. And we need a lot more play and openness.
Maybe
I think
make one last remark to that, and then I'll pull out, because now I'm far more talking than I thought I would. But the great notion of parrhesia, which is courageous speaking, but also courageous hearing. In other words, the ability to listen to other people's view in a way that might lead you or put at risk the idea of you changing your own discourse, is another way to try to get to this idea of with the notion of voices, of a way of speaking out courageously, but also being able to hear courageously. I just wanted to end my contribution on that point.
Thank you.
Can I add something, Bob and Betsy? It's a thread that runs through your book, and it runs through Sartre's thought from beginning to end, and it addresses this question. I love your question. And you got solidarity, heterogeneity, and fecundity all in one place. How do you keep them from canceling each other out? I think one way to look at it is to think of, and this again runs through Bob and Betsy's book, it's inevitable, Sartre's notion of the singular universal or the universal singular. He uses both forms. It's captured in his well-known quip, what did he say? Valery was a petit bourgeois, but not every petit bourgeois was Valery. We are each singularly universal in Sartre's understanding of what it means to be human. So if you're looking at an example of solidarity and you see it having a homogenizing effect, it's not solidarity, it's something else. Solidarity, by definition, has to occur within the context of this singular universality of each human being becoming in their own way, who they're capable of being. So you might see big lumps of lots of people together acting the same. That's not solidarity. Whatever it is, it's not, in Sartre's sense of the term, anything remotely like solidarity. So it's just a thought that that notion of the singular universal, I think, cannot be overemphasized in understanding his mature ethics.
Yeah, you're
I
absolutely
like
right.
that much. Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew.
Do I see John Wetter out here?
I should put my.
Somebody here has got their hand raised, but they've gone out of
Oh.
the room. I don't know who that
And
is.
Carson, so nice to see you.
Hi, Karsten. It's good to see you.
I saw David Sprinson here earlier.
Yep. Yep. And David Detmer's hiding there.
Yes.
Matt Eshelman's hiding there.
Well,
Hi, there's David.
Hi there. I just want to say I'm speaking from France and the connection is not great, but I did want to celebrate the fact that your book is published. It's just wonderful. And I really look forward to reading it.
Thank
And I
you.
may have to sign off soon, but I just wanted to make sure it's late in France, as you know.
Yes.
I know. I know.
I
Can you hear me?
saw
Little France.
it for us.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Hello. Oh, yes, of
Oh,
course.
sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks for
because
saying hello.
because the connection isn't great on my end.
Right. You can tell from the
This
wallpaper
Jack-
that you're in France. Yeah. You
I
can't.
think Betty has a question for you.
She
Yes.
did. She still has her hand up, though. I don't know.
Yeah,
if she-
yeah, I had to answer the door if you, sorry. I got
still
a
have another
doorbell. Anyway, I
question.
just wanted to, well, first of all, it's great that you finished your book. As you know, I've got one I've been working on forever. I was thinking in terms of what you said about play, Betsy, it's called In the Spirit of Play. I do think that's important in terms of fecundity and diversity and all the rest of it. So I was also thinking about Sartre's discussion of groups and the critique and the way they evolve into bureaucracies and then institutions. And I was thinking maybe part of what we need to do is find a way to keep the group infusion going.
Well,
I mean, I know I try to do that in therapy groups and I think I'm fairly successful, but I'm not sure how you do it in larger groups.
Well, that's been the issue for quite a few centuries now, is how to keep the group infusion going, or once it gets to the pledge group, to keep the pledge group from falling into the seriality and the institution. That, of course, is, you know, one of the major questions that Sartre asked in his work. One of the reasons why I guess I'm still, you know, reading Sartre is that he asks really good questions, really important questions that nobody really has an answer to. And it's something that we keep thinking about and looking around and wondering if someone's going to answer to, well, yes, how do you beat back the practicone, or how do you keep the pledge group or the fusing group from falling into seriality? And remember, he says that morality is born in the pledge group. You know, that humanity, yeah, that too. So I don't know. I think playing with all of these questions is always worthwhile.
For sure.
Well, there we are, back to playing again.
Questions, thoughts, interjections?
Yeah, what I'm proposing in this book is that the spirit of play might be where we go after we repudiate the spirit of seriousness in existential psychoanalysis.
Well, great. I'm going to join your group then, Betty. I can't see it. You might get us back to Boulder, you know?
Yeah, come on. You know, you're always welcome.
You have to promise it won't snow, though.
Yeah. Have to come at the right time of day. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The right time of day. Other thoughts, comments, suggestions?
Yes, please. Who is that? What?
I'm not sure. That person. Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead. Your hand is up. I got it.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not very familiar with Sartre, but the discussion is resonating with things I've thought about in other contexts. And I'm thinking particularly two strands of the conversation are really coming together for me around how to think of solidarity as not just accommodating heterogeneity, but requiring it. and the notion of play. And both of those for me just say Maria Lugones. She's an Argentinian American lesbian philosopher, died a few years ago, Maria Lugones, Lugones. I'm sure many of you are familiar with her work. And she talks about playfulness and loving perception and a lot about solidarity across difference and how not to focus on similarity, but to focus on connection and to experience, and partly she calls on the attitude of playfulness as a way to experience one's own disorientation when moving into what she calls a different world or a different world of sense. And she talks about world traveling and the importance of doing that and experiencing one's own sense of strangeness in being in a different place and acknowledging who one is in the eyes of those others and what one animates. So, for example, what I animate as a white person in a moving into a world, a Black world or an Indigenous world or whatever, and taking responsibility for what we animate, and also not trying to translate the other into terms that are familiar to me, but to live with and move together through the strangeness. So the themes are very, very resonant for me. And I don't know whether anybody has actually worked on connections between Lugones and Sartre. I don't think that she ever refers to him, but the connections were just sort of so intense for me as I was listening to this fascinating discussion.
Thank you for that intervention. I want to learn more. What was the name of the?
Lugones is the.
I know Maria Lugones's work. What was the book?
Her made most of her papers, including the ones on playfulness and world travel and some on solidarity, are in a book called Pilgrimages, Peregrinajes. It's got the English and the Spanish title. And then after that, she was working on decoloniality in particular and engaging with a lot of Latin American thinkers. And those works, so far as I know, have not been collected in a book. They're in journal articles. But for the playfulness and the world travel and the solidarity, it would be Pilgrimages, Peregrinajes.
Well, it's always a challenge to not translate other cultural experiences into one's own. And that, that's something, we're living in Mexico, that's something that we deal with every day, every minute of our lives, trying to, and moving around the world, when we're traveling, of course, and it's a challenge. It's a real challenge, and it's also a lot of fun. And I think it helps to be playful when dealing with it. And Dennis, you have a question?
I did want to address your work with the manuscripts, if I could. Is that okay?
Sure.
Because again, going back to Beauvoir's comment, I find it difficult to imagine that Sartre would have put this second ethics aside and not go back to it as 1968 happened, as the events, the early part of the 1970s happened. Did you notice in your work on the manuscripts, Sartre's correcting, adding, subtracting, something different from what you were working on? In other words, was there an evolution in the manuscripts that you worked on, or was there a point where you said, okay, we're just going to take what we have here and go with it as his thoughts up to about 1965? In other words, I'm thinking to what extent, like after 1968, does he go back to these pages and say, I've got to update this, or I've got to add this, or change this?
That stopped in 72 when he moved on to the third ethics.
Well, when he moved on to the Flaubert, he always said that he stopped the ethics to get back to his work on Flaubert. And
Betty's remark on the Flaubert is right on the money
Yeah,
is crucial.
Yeah, the ethics in a lot of ways is in the Flaubert too.
Right, right.
No, from working with the manuscripts, you know, they look like they were written very quickly. And I know he did go back, and you can see where he, on the typescripts, where he's made a few little changes. But I think he did all of that in 64, 65, shortly thereafter, and it was in 68 when he gave the Rome manuscript to Michel Villon, right?
I
Or
think it
was
was
no,
65.
65, yeah, it was
He was-
65 that he gave them the Rome manuscript to Michel Villon. And at that point, he'd probably already finished the Cornell. That was February in 65 when he gave the manuscript to Michel. And March, he was supposed to go to Cornell. And I think, you know, that's when Johnson started bombing North Vietnam. I think he just dropped it. February, yeah. I think he just dropped it then.
Yeah,
Well, he meant to go back to it, as you put it, for until he decided that it was
Wow. Why did he never finish it? That's something we've been wondering about for 40
well,
years.
well, that's what I was, that's what I,
essay-
do you have an hypothesis as to why it seems to have, no, the Flaubert is certainly an excellent idea, and he talks about that directly. He stopped a lot of things to get to the Flaubert.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
The Flaubert is crucial for its diagnosis of the objective neurosis of Black humanism. Humanity is shit that we are,
The self-hatred of,
self-hatred of the human,
which we see everywhere, you know,
which
all over the
Flaubert
place.
sold to the
Right,
bourgeoisie time, as it was discovered.
And which Trump still
Capitalism
sells.
is in the package of bourgeois humanism, and so human self-hatred, hatred of
Mhm.
humanity became the theme of that Flaubert succeeded in instilling in his readers.
thank you. Yeah,
I think ultimately, finally, after all is said and done, I think he sort of got discouraged and gave up, and he saw the determination of the United States to bomb to smithereens any society that opposed.
Successful repression
Yeah,
in
I-
65 that started in 65, and so far as I can tell, has never stopped.
yeah, it continues.
But
to
it's
expand.
now being undermined by the de-dollarization movement going around the world, that it will sooner or later deprive the US of its unearned privileges of having the world's reserve currency.
But that's a topic for another webinar that we've been thinking about, I've been thinking about for a long time. Well, Michael Hudson said just the other day, you know, in an essay about, you know, oh, America, the United States has just destroyed a great empire itself. And there's a lot of truth to that. So we'll see.
Celia, ¿qué tal? Qué bueno verte.
Hola amigos.
Puedes seguir la conversación.
This is our comrade from Mexico City and the Workers' Economy Network. She works with, we work with her closely in the Workers'
love her
Economy,
very
the
much.
international network. So part of our activism here in the third world or Mexico or.
Pues entiendo mejor de lo que hablo en inglés, ¿no?
Sí.
Es muy difícil para mí comunicarme en inglés, pero me parece muy estimulante tanto la conferencia de ustedes como los temas que han aparecido, como este de la solidaridad. Quisiera estar en esa comuna donde todos cocinamos y donde todos podemos discutir, dedicarnos a eso, ¿verdad? Tener nuestra comuna y
Sí.
construir nuestra pequeña vida comunista, ¿verdad? Es lo más que podemos hacer. Espero, ¿cómo podemos tener el libro? ¿Cómo lo podemos leer?
Oh,
Estamos esperando la paper.
the situation on getting a copy of our book,
Trent-
Matthew Alley might be able to speak to that
Yes.
better than we can. What exists right now is the library version. It's very expensive and it doesn't have a jacket
Beautiful.
cover. Yeah, this is just printed onto the hardback. It's $125, or you can get 30% off. We'll get that, the order form up on our webpage. But it should come out in paperback in a year or so. And we've asked everybody at RPA and the North American Sartre Society to order it for their libraries. And then that will push the publisher to put it out in paperback, and then it'll be much more accessible. But it's very hard to get a copy of it right now.
Yeah, there isn't really anything more to say than that, but a few years back, it would have been a year and a half or more. Chances are it'll be a year or so now, and the paperback will be out. But there's really no way to speed it up faster than that, because that's already going to be pretty quick for the press. But at that point, it will be humanly priced instead of inhumanly priced, which
Right.
seems fitting for a book like yours. Listen, I have to go, Bob and Betsy. I love you. I'll be in touch, okay? Bye-bye. I will. Okay, we'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.
So that was our
Yeah.
editor, Matthew Alley, who
Yeah.
30 years ago.
I have to go soon
I
also.
know you gotta go
but-
too, Carson. Lucky you, you're in France. I wish we were. But
I'm going to go
But it
as
was,
well, but I really want to congratulate you again.
thank
And
you.
I do look forward to reading it, and maybe wait for the paperback. We'll see, because I don't know that much about Sartre's second ethics. So that will be great. And also, I'm just really happy that you got it done. I'm sure that feels a tremendous relief.
It is.
And the only other thing I would say is I'm sorry Cliff is not here to also celebrate it.
I know.
Yeah.
And we are too.
So be well, all of you.
You too.
You too.
And hello to Olga.
I will.
Enjoy France for us.
Yeah, thank you. We're actually in Brittany
Yeah.
now, which is quite lovely.
X. En Provence.
In what?
Where?
In Brittany,
Oh, in
Oh.
Brittany.
which is quite beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, a question from,
Yes, Gregory.
no, from this person.
Okay. Yes, please.
This is longer than we usually take, but if we're happy to,
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful to
to
be with
chat.
you and to see dear, dear friends.
I hope you'll all be at the Sartre Society Conference in
Well,
November,
well.
or those of you who are Sartreans anyway.
John Wetterow, tell about how you are, my dear friend.
I'm good. I'm still doing what I can about immigration issues through documentary.
Oh,
Still with the Hotel Trades Council doing AV hotels in Midtown.
making a living that?
Good.
Yeah, things are fine.
Great, I'm so glad.
I'm so happy to see you guys have finished what I know has been more than 20 years of
Oh,
work,
40.
effort
Well, thanks to Matthew
Well,
Alley.
it's great to have
there's
such
a-
wonderful feedback from so many dear friends. Let me tell you, it's gratifying. And
Yeah,
it makes me want to engage with each of you. So please
we
let
haven't
us,
heard much from David Detmer, but maybe we will in November. That's
I
okay.
haven't had a chance to read the book yet. I'm kind of waiting for that.
oh, no,
Right,
very
right.
few have, not to worry.
Yeah, yeah,
Is that David?
right there, yeah.
Oh, yeah, hi, David.
You have to remember, everybody has gray hair. now.
Everyone has gray hair now.
Well, it's
I've
good
got,
to see you, Pat. Oh, except for John. John doesn't have gray.
there's a bunch of hairs in there. But I'll be 50 next year. They'll probably all go.
Okay, well, maybe. It's good
Well,
to see you,
Beautiful
Pat.
to see you all.
Well,
Is that
thank you
Pat?
all. Yeah, that's Pat Lee from
Oh,
Chattanooga.
Pat, oh, that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
and your brother's there, Hicks,
Hicks, oh, yeah, wonderful.
and Luke's there too.
Luke, yeah.
Yeah. And Robert Gold. Well, you're hiding. It's great to see you. And
Yes,
thank you so
for
much
coming.
for tuning in.
Yes, it's
And
beautiful.
send us an email and say hello and make sure that we have your email too.
What's your email address?
My,
What's the best, that's the best way to contact you?
yeah, Bowman Betsy at gmail.com, and Bob is bobstone68@gmail.com.
Okay,
There
thank you.
are a lot of Bob Stones, so we just Bob Stone and a number we could remember, 68, of course.
All right, thanks, you
Thank
guys.
you all very much.
Bye.
Thank you
For coming
thank
and
you for
participating.
participating. It's great to see you all.
I'd love to talk
Wonderful.
with each of you in person. Be
Come to
well.
Mexico.
Come to Mexico for sure.
Many thanks. Bye.
It's great to see you guys and wonderful about the book. Yeah.
Gracias,
See you,
hola.
Betty.
Yeah.
Great to see everyone. And there's coffee too. Not for you guys, but
Oh,
for the-
too bad.
come on over.
Pronto, Betsy, Bob. Hasta pronto.
Gracias.
Betsy,
ya.
cuídate.
Hasta luego.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Sheila. Bye, Gregory.